Hi everybody. Today we're going to continue our chapter 10 out of the catering text, which is on beverage management. Now, I know this section is put in with the rest of the event management material, but I think it's that important that we should pull it out and cover it separately in a separate week. You know, beverage management is crucial to the success or failure of a catering operation. And you may say, well, I may not want to sell liquor, or I'm just going to sell wine and beer. You still have to have policies in place that are going to make sure that your customers have an enjoyable time, but also protects you. There are so many positives financially that will come from selling liquor, but the liability that you take on and the issues can be great. I give you an example of years ago. I was working in a college, and we had our own liquor license at the college. In other words, we sold liquor for our catered events. And I had an event where a gentleman was incredibly intoxicated. The problem was, it was his event. He had booked it. He had given about $5 million to the school the year before. He was well known, and he was drunk on his butt. Well, the guests were starting to get very inebriated. This gentleman had two young women with him who I'm pretty sure I can say now were definitely underage. They were drinking. So what do you do in that situation? Well, you call your boss. Your boss says, handle it, and hangs up on you. Nobody wants to deal with a major donor having too much to drink. So what we did was we quit serving alcohol. We took the bottles away and told them the bar was closed. What the guests proceeded to do was actually go out and buy their own liquor and bring it back to the site. And we were at an off-site event at our alumni center at the school. So they brought their own liquor. So we hid the glasses. They went out and got glasses. We hid the corkscrews. They went out and bought some. This went back and forth for probably an hour and a half. All the while they continued to drink, I think almost to spite me. The two young ladies that were with the one guest, at one point I saw them go into the restroom and heard them starting to vomit. So now I've got underage, I'm pretty sure, young girls who are throwing up in the bathroom. If someone from that party left and had an accident, whose fault would it have been? Mine for serving them initial alcohol, the guests for bringing in other alcohol. It was the single worst liquor-related event I've ever been associated with. How it ended up being resolved, just so you know, is the school told this gentleman that we love your money, but you're going to have your secretary book all of your events for the next year. You can't do them yourself. Quite a slap on the hand. But those situations happen. There are a number of videos I put attached to this chapter that talk about how to handle people who are going to cause you trouble with alcohol. In other words, you have a guest who's drank too much. How do you handle that? Things happen. You know, bartenders, get better tips when they keep serving people. Do you think every bartender, especially if you've hired a bartender service to come in, do they care so much? Maybe they give someone a little extra because they're a big tipper. You have these issues. One of the things you have to do is you have to buy good liability insurance. And liability insurance is that insurance that you have, and if you have car insurance, you have liability insurance. But if you're in an accident or cause an accident, money will be available to pay for the expenses of that person you've hurt or the property damage or whatever. We can actually buy liability insurance for the alcohol industry. And if you do have alcohol at events, you would have to buy liability insurance. Now, say you don't want to do alcohol for every event. You can buy separate liquor licenses, one-day liquor license, and also get a limited liability policy to cover X amount of events, which is a much less expensive way to go. So if you say, I don't typically do alcohol, but I've got a champagne brunch that these people want to do for a wedding, you don't have to go out and spend a great deal of money. All right. Now, just because you have liability insurance doesn't mean you can get away with murder, all right? Well, I've got insurance, what's the worst that can happen? Well, death, jail, bankruptcy, all those types of things. I cannot stress to you how important it is that you institute good controls if you're going to have liquor, how you have good liability insurance, how you buy or hire the proper people to work for you who are going to be handling liquor. And most importantly is train, train, and train. Like I said, the videos that are connected to this chapter I think are really good. They give you some things not to do and then things you should do on service. And it's more than just noticing that somebody may have had too much. It's simple little tricks. For example, if you've got people that are drinking fairly heavy, if you have a non-alcoholic beverage that you could pass around and people could drink, whether it be a sparkling water or a lemonade or something, to help dilute. It gives them something else to drink and it dilutes what they're drinking. Also having a backup plan of a cab service or a designated driver, something along those lines, can also be a real perk that a caterer can offer. You don't see that very often, but I think that's a good idea. Depending on whether you run the bar yourself or whether you hire somebody, is going to tell you what you have to buy, of course. If you're going to do things yourself, you're going to have to buy an assortment of drinkware. Now, are we buying glass? Are we buying plastic? Once again, it's going to depend on your market. It's going to depend on your event. Once again, we go back to rentals. You can rent pretty much everything from a cocktail glass to a champagne flute on about everything you could use in between. Me, I love disposable. I've mentioned it before. Anytime I can drop something off, they use it, I charge them for it, and I don't have to pick it back up. I don't have to store it. That's great. Typically when I rent glasses, we get them in clean, we use them, we put it in the containers they came in, we send them back dirty, so we don't even have to wash them. It depends on your setup. It depends on your philosophy. Do I like to rent equipment or not? But glassware. And that's an assortment of glassware. Alright? For those of you who don't drink, there are different types of beverages out there that don't just come out of a beer or wine bottle. And they need to have certain types of glasses. We have tall glasses we call highball glasses. We have rocks glasses, which are short for things like an old-fashioned or a Rob Roy or things like that. Champagne flutes, which I've mentioned before. You might have daiquiri glasses for those types of things. You might have Pilsner glasses for beer if you don't want people drinking out of a bottle, or you have draft beer. You need something like that. Specialty glasses. I have a whole bunch of margarita glasses somewhere in my house that are shaped like cactuses. Fun stuff. Glass, kind of expensive. You can buy a plastic disposable version though of those too. So an assortment of glassware. Shakers, things to strain, things to stir, blenders, alright, immersion blenders, regular blenders, shaken drinks, and frothy and icy drinks are so popular these days. Things to peel, things to zest, things to light on fire, for those that want to go to that extra scary step. There's a lot of equipment that goes into a bar. Even, once again, we go back to an off-premise site. Where are you going to get your ice from? You're going to have to truck ice in. So you've got to have big containers of mobile containers that you can put ice in that'll hold, hundreds of pounds of ice. There's a lot to think about there. On the other hand, what some people do is they'll hire a bar service. And there are companies out there that do nothing but bar catering. You can hire them kind of like a subcontractor, and they go in and they do the event and do the liquor for you. So basically you're hiring them on a temporary basis. Alright. The nice thing about that is they typically will have their own liability insurance. They have trained staff that have worked together before. They are up on the liquor laws, they're up on training, they are very efficient, they get in, they do the job, they get out. They don't do anything that's going to get anybody in trouble, so they're very cognizant of the fact of over-serving and things like that. Do you pay extra for that? Sure. But to be able to provide the service of alcohol without the extra cost of the liability, I think that's important. Although just because you're not serving the drinks don't mean you will be absolved completely of any liability issues, but it may help. There's all different types of bar service out there that you can see in a catered event. You might have a cash bar. That's where people go up and they pay it whatever, $5, you give them a drink, or a bartender gives them a drink. So basically everything that somebody orders they pay for. When I was in college, getting my bachelor's degree right out of high school, myself and about 6 other kids ran an open bar out of our fraternity house. Very illegal, but we made a fortune doing that. And we would go to the local drugstore, which was an Osco's back then, and we would buy the cheapest liquor we could find. There was a brand called Heaven Hill. I think they actually still make it, but it would be about $2 a bottle for Heaven Hill bourbon. And we would go back to the house and we would put it into a Jack Daniel's bottle. And then on Friday night, we'd open the bar up by putting basically a board over a couple of beer kegs in the kitchen of the fraternity house and have a cash drawer, and we'd open for business. And people say, I want a Jack Daniel's shot. So we'd pour the Heaven Hill out of the Jack Daniel's and we'd make a fortune on it. I think our drink of choice that we were known for was our Spider Mai Tai, which was basically like a quadruple strength drink of 3 different types of rum and a little bit of pineapple juice and like a splash of coconut. Brutal, deadly. We should have been arrested. But so a cash bar. You might also have an open bar. Boy, this is everybody's favorite at a wedding, the open bar. That means you can go up and as a guest and just get whatever you want to drink. And you can do it as long as they'll keep serving you. It's an open bar. What the caterer has done there or will do is they're going to keep track of the total bottles consumed, and that's what they're going to charge the client. Now the client may say it's an open bar for the first X amount of bottles, and then we either shut it off or we go to a cash bar, because people can be crazy at those things. Typically in those events, caterers will not transport bottles back with them. So if they have a liquor license, what they'll do is they'll go ahead and let the customer keep any remaining open bottles, because we don't like to transport open bottles from site to site. So those are basically 2 of the things. You might also just you do a hybrid of those, but those are the major ones. We mentioned bartenders and servers and stuff, and I can't once again stress enough that it's important to have well-trained bartenders. Now, pretty much anybody can take a glass, put some ice in it, pour a little liquor into it, and be done with it. But the reason we want a good bartender is that bartender is kind of like our eyes and ears out there to make sure that we don't see any trouble coming. They're going to be the first person to notice if someone has had too much to drink. Maybe there's a fight going to happen, things like that. A good bartender is a great spy to have out there. So you don't want to hire just anybody, all right? And you never let the guest start pouring either. And I've seen events where the guest would like to be part of the show. So good people, good servers, once again, who are taking drinks out, can be the best line of defense when it comes to you getting in trouble. All right, people that care about the business as much as you do. One of the most popular things to drink in a catered event is wine. Okay, so we have a lot of toasts, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the differences between wine and stuff. There's some good information in your book. Good to read about the types of wine. There are different types of red, different types of white, different temperatures to hold those on, different glassware. Let's go back to glassware again. You may see people are using these giant, big, red wine glasses, big red wine glasses, but we only pour a small amount in there. Why do we do that? Well, the whole thing with the red wine is we want to get our nose in it, and we want to smell all the aromas that come off that, because that smell is a big part of the flavor. Where wine glasses, we typically don't care about the odoriferous qualities, the smell that we get off of them. Champagne flutes. Why do we use a really tall, slender glass for champagne? Well, because it makes the bubbles look better. Back in the day, we used to use these really kind of flat little champagne glasses you'd see in the 50s, but they don't show off the bubbles and they evaporate too quick. And so that's why we go to the other. So knowing how to store wine, how to pour wine, and glasses wine stuff, usually your client will tell you what they want. And situations that I've been in, and I'm not a huge wine drinker, if at all, but I know enough about wine pairings to be able to suggest certain styles of wine. But I typically will ask the client, what would you prefer, and go that route. Now, you might have a situation where the caterer client wants to bring their own wine in, and you've got a liquor license that allows that, or the venue you're doing allows them to bring their own wine in. That's great, but some places will charge them what we call a corkage fee. In other words, you can bring your own in, but we still are going to charge you a fee for doing that. You'll see that in restaurants as well. Restaurants that for some reason or another don't have a regular liquor license but allow people to bring in, and they'll charge you to bring your own stuff in. Just mention champagne briefly there in the types of glasses. One of my pet peeves is when people call any type of sparkling white wine champagne. Champagne actually comes from the Champagne region of France. So when you go buy a Martini and Asti Spumante, that actually comes from the Asti region of Italy. It's not French. Alright, so if you're going to do a menu, it's best to say sparkling wine, because if you put champagne, you probably ought to buy real champagne. There's a good section in your book on page 298 on how much to estimate your clients are going to drink, and that's important for a couple reasons. One, it's going to let you know how much inventory you should take. It is also going to give you an idea, are we getting in trouble by people getting too much? Because if we've planned for X amount during the event and we start to see that our consumption is much higher, then we know we've got a problem. But there's a good section on that. But there are some things to think about. Just some common sense things is, people drink different things depending on the weather. If it's summertime, they're going to tend to drink a lot more beer and a lot more lighter things, and icy fruity drinks. And then in the winter, they drink things that are the warmer alcohols more. People tend to drink a lot more when they're cold. All right, it helps them warm up. People are going to drink more depending on what type of food. Let's face it, people are going to drink a lot more if you go to a beer and or a brat and burger party. People are going to tend to drink a lot more beer than they would if, say, we were going to an event that was serving a catered meal of meatloaf. You get the point. Same thing, they might drink a lot more wine for an Italian dinner than they would at other things. So keep that in mind when planning your menu. We use an example of a Mexican dinner with margaritas. It's where margaritas may be consumed a few at a regular party. You pair it with Mexican food, and all of a sudden, everybody's going to want a margarita. So there are a number of other things that you're going to have to think about. We mentioned equipment and such, but if you're going to run a bar, there's a whole lot of other things you're going to have. Limes, lemons, mixers, other garnishes, maraschino cherries, olives, cocktail onions, olive juice for the dirty martini fans, sour mix, club soda, tonic water to go in your gin. All those types of things you're going to have and have well stocked. We didn't really talk too much about it back in the section on staffing, but if you're going to be doing liquor, you need to have a separate bar manager. You need to have that one person who is in charge of the stock to make sure they have everything, make sure the staff's trained, because it is a business among itself. Now, there are people that have taken the liquor business to a greater extent and try to do more fun things with it. We've talked about the stations that you can do with culinary arts. Basically, someone comes up, we make crepe Suzette, we set some things on fire in a pan, or Cherry's Jubilee, something along those lines, Banana Foster, if you will. But you can do the same thing with liquor. You could have specialized liquor bars. You could have one side of the room just be like a specialty vodka bar. Or what's really big these days, martini bars. And martinis used to be gin with a splash of vermouth, shaken, not stirred, with an olive in it or a cocktail onion. And now we call about everything that is not served on the rocks a martini. And so, but they're big things these days. separate beverage stations like rolling carts, or one of my favorite, when you're down in Mexico or down in Florida, you've got a poolside bar that you can swim up to. Having a bar in the pool, that's my kind of a pool party. You swim over, you get a drink, you swim back. Make sure if you do that, we're using plastic and non-breakable plastic glasses, right? Never want to have glass around the pool. Or themed beverages. Once again, margaritas for the Mexican night, or pina coladas for a tropical thing. I was married once where we had a pina colada party instead of regular punch, and we served people out of coconut shells that we had bought, cut, sanded the top off, hollowed out, and we served pina coladas. So it was a big hit. Now, there are other beverages. You may find this hard to believe, but we can make money on other things besides alcohol. Coffee service, all right? If you're doing business and industry catering, or a place that's going to cater to an office building, they're going to do a ton of coffee. Coffee, relatively inexpensive to make. 6 cents a cup, 10 cents a cup, depending on your coffee. You can charge $1 a cup. So great money there. We go through the same issues we talked about before. What type of glasses do we use? Disposable? Do we use china? Think about all the condiments. Do we get little packages of creamer? Do we get powder creamer? Do we get cream and put it in nice little containers? How do we transport the coffee? We had a situation here where we were using what we call air pots, which are big thermal insulated pots. You put coffee in them, you push a handle, but we were having trouble with the guests getting them to work. So we went with more of a single-use, disposable coffee container, like Panera and some of those places use. No more problems. I give them the container, I charge them an extra $5 for coffee service, and away they go. You might have something for just a morning coffee service. You might have all-day coffee service where you're going to have staff replenish all through the day. But you can make good money on that. Along the same lines, we have tea service. All right. Once again, like the martini used to be just a little gin and vermouth in a glass. Iced tea, hot tea has gone to new heights. We used to have just black tea. Now we've got green tea, we've got red tea, we've got Chinese, we've got Indian, we've got tea from Ceylon, British teas. You could do quite the tea bar if you wanted to. If you have the right crowd, a tea catering bar might be pretty cool. But once again, you have to have something that's going to brew the water to the right temperature. You're going to have something to store the bags in. You have to train your staff when they serve tea. Would you like lemon with that? Would you like some cream with that? When they take the order. So there's a lot they could do with that. But you're going to have more training. But don't think alcohol is the only way to actually make money on it. I even like the idea of soda pops. I'm a huge soda fan. And I love the idea of a soda bar where you can actually make fun drinks with it. So you're making like egg creams, you're making floats, you're making sodas, little ice cream, little chocolate syrup, little soda, root beer floats, things like that. I think for kids parties, they can be a really great time. Who doesn't like a root beer float or a Coca-Cola float? Orange soda, a little scoop of vanilla ice cream. What kid wouldn't love that at a party? Once again, we got to think about our glassware situation. How would we keep the ice cream cold? How would we keep the soda cold? Is mom okay with us serving these kids all this sugar? A lot of things, but that's one of those things that would set you apart. A soda bar for a kid's party, I think, is fun. One of those things we talked about with alcohol, one of the favorite events I ever did years ago was we had a liquor event at a party, but the liquor was all for dessert. It was part of a chocolate dessert catering, and so we had Vandermint and creme de menthe, amaretto, all these sweeter type alcohols, and we did it all with either ice cream or in a flambe with crepes or something along that line of fruit. So there wasn't any shots. Everybody got everything or anything. It was all based on dessert, and that was one of the more fun things that I ever did with alcohol. That's kind of my spiel on alcohol. There's actually a lot more in this chapter on it, but I'm going to let you read that for yourself. It is an important chapter if you're going to plan to work with alcohol. It's laid out really well. It's got some great information. Please take the time to look at the videos that I've attached on service and also bar setup, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.